What's one secret you and a parent have kept from the other parental figure? My mom used to send my dad into my room to spank me. He would whisper to me that we were going to play a little pretend game to make my mom happy. He would tell me he was going to clap his hands, and I needed to pretend to cry like I was being spanked. I really didn't realize how awesome my dad was for doing that until much later in life. His own dad was pretty abusive to him, and he couldn't stand the thought of hitting a kid because of it. Dad actually carried out the spanking a couple times. I think it was harder on him to deliver it than it was to receive it, seriously. Having said that, when my sister and I were 3 and 4, parents took us on a 6-month trip around North America. For the trip back from BC to Ontario, they sold the camper, and just had a topper on the pickup. Leftover food supplies and stuff stacked up, and room for us to play in it. Plus, with us in the topper, they couldn't hear us if we got whiny. It was the early 70s, parenting was interesting. Anyways, they stop at a rest area for a break, open the topper to release us, and a cloud of white dust rolls out. And there we sit, totally covered in flour and pancake mix. Totally covered except for our blinking eyes. Mom loses it. Tells Dad to take us to the restrooms and clean us up, and to spank us, while she cleans up the mess. After a while, she realizes she doesn't hear spanking and crying, all she hears is giggles and my dad laughing. She gives him shit, and he's like, I don't know what we expected when we locked em in there with that stuff, we deserved it. Good times. I don't know what we expected when we locked em in there with that stuff, we deserved it. There we go, that's a good parent. Realistic assessment of your own mistakes, lol. Honestly, half of the stuff I get frustrated about with my toddlers stems from my own lack of forethought. There is a lot of forethought, but it's often exhausting trying to predict every what might go wrong. Best thing my mom ever said, and it works just as well for a classroom full of 14-year-olds, is pick your battles. If what goes wrong isn't actually wrong, just let it go. The unexpected isn't always disastrous. Just prepare zones to be easily cleaned, and figure shit's gonna happen. When I was about 8, I was helping my dad put up Christmas lights on the second floor roof. This was the 80s, safety didn't exist yet. He told me to get another strand and I walked to the edge. The roof was pretty flat, and I straight up slipped and fell off the roof and landed on the picnic table on the ground floor. My dad had no idea that I fell off until I yelled back, I'm okay. He made me swear that I'd never tell my mom. And that was the last year we ever put lights up on the roof. Edit, a literal so, yeah, my dad was absolutely freaked out after he turned around and didn't see me when I called out. As others have pointed out, you were pretty flexible at that age, and what helped me was that I was scrawny. I couldn't have weighed more than 60 pounds at the time. I didn't even break the table. I did not keep this secret long, actually, but you remind me of the ill-fated night of July 4, 2019. It will live in infamy with myself and my 4 children, whom I nearly killed with a large firework. It was one of the big box type of fireworks, with large projectiles all wicked together inside the box. The grass was a bit dry, so I thought, dumbly, that the safest maneuver would be to set the box on some bricks. As the projectiles went up in the air, I think there were like 20, the box weighed less on the side they were dispensing from. As the box lightened, it started to tip. First subtly, then frighteningly. Eventually, the final few started pointing directly at the children and I. One hit the chimney of my home, and the final shot hit me right in the knee, causing a large welt of idiocy, and actually blackened my daughter's shorts as it ricocheted. Not my proudest parenting moment, and now they are a bit frightened of fireworks for some strange reason. This reminds me of when my dad decided to throw a roll of fireworks into a bonfire. Thankfully, we were out in the country and nothing was around. But we had to duck and cover when that thing started going off. Then we thought it was done, so we all went back to chatting around the fire. Then, about 20 minutes later, a couple more rounds went off. Scared the shit out of us. During a period when my parents and I weren't getting along, they decided to burn a few boxes of stuff I had stored in their garage, without asking me, without checking contents. One box was a good collection of various fireworks. Evidently the old bonfire got a lot more exciting than they had anticipated. They tried to give me shit we could have been badly hurt. I was like, it's my fault you burned a bunch of my stuff without any notice? Mom had the grace to admit they were in the wrong. They just burned your stuff because you weren't getting along? What the duck? Some people are like that. My mom used to do that when she got mad at me. Either come through my room and find the stuff she knew I liked and used often, and either break it right there or take it out to the fire pit if that was a better way to destroy it. I found the safest place for my stuff was actually being hidden among her storage stuff in a building in the yard. She almost never went out there, so I graduated HS early, and I had my secret stash ready to leave because I knew she would kick me out once I was done with school. She kept destroying stuff for years that I didn't care about. What a waste of her money. We've told her now, but at the time and for some time afterwards, my dad and I pretended that we went to visit my mother in hospital one morning just because we were both free. That dad had had a meeting cancelled and I didn't have a class yet. Actually, it was because the hospital had called and told us that if we waited to visit her that evening, as we usually did, we might be too late to see her again. Apparently the mood lift off seeing loved ones can make the difference and did that day, the staff thought. She also thought we left after a couple of hours. Actually, she lost consciousness and we sat watching her vital signs monitors for most of the day. When she came to, it was our usual visit time and she didn't think anything of it. This was over 20 years ago now. She's alive and well. I'm so glad this had a happy ending both for you and your dad. Yeah. It was rough. She didn't start to stabilize until early afternoon. But we got through. Had one of these up until recently. It's not entirely within the scope of the question, but a funny tale is a funny tale. I was going on a senior class trip and had saved up some money to splurge a bit while I was there. My family had very little money back then, which is why I made it a point to save up for myself so that my parents wouldn't have to. A few days prior, my dad says, "Hey, here's a few $100, have a great time and make some lasting memories. Don't tell your mother." I, naturally, agreed and didn't tell my mother. The very next day, my mom says, "Hey, here's a few $100, have a great time and make some lasting memories. Don't tell your father." I, naturally, agreed and didn't tell my father. The trip was friggin' amazing. I was able to do way more than I had planned and was able to help a few of my friends do the same. I told my parents that it was amazing, and each of them separately gave me the old wink wink nudge nudge and were really happy for me. Decades later, I was visiting my family and the subject of doing don't tell the other parent stuff came up since I have kids of my own now. And I told them about how they had both given me the extra money for the trip, and how I was more than happy to not tattle on them to each other. They looked at each other, all comically wide-eyed, and laughed their asses off, swatting at each other's arms and stuff. My favorite part of this is that they're still together and still playful with each other. When my daughter was 4, she really wanted to play with the strings of magnetic balls I had on my desk. I know they say for children over the age of 12, but she was having a really good time. She came up to me about 20 minutes later meekly saying, "Daddy?" And I could see that the bottom of one was sticking out her nose. Not knowing how many were up there, I gently used bigger magnets. I had to coax the whole string out. Was decided to never share any of that incident with Mom. Along with the MRI issues, these magnets are also potentially very dangerous if they are swallowed. 2 of them at different points in the intestines can end up snapping together and then bad stuff happens. Edit. Thanks everyone for the kind words. I'm kind of overwhelmed, but I really appreciate it. For what it's worth, I know of many people, both personally and anecdotally, who have said really uncharacteristic, maudlin, hateful things when heavily drugged. Things that would never make sense any other time or were just the polar opposite of them as people. So, there may be a grain of truth in what your stepfather said. More than anything, I hope you don't blame yourself. My grandma died a couple years back. Sweetest, most proper old woman that ever existed. She was pretty heavily medicated near the end, but still complaining of lots of pain. My mother, her daughter, was with her in the hospital, so tried to distract her. My mom, let's try to focus on what doesn't hurt. Do your toes hurt? Grandma, no. My mom, do your knees hurt? Grandma, no. That reminds me of a song. Do your balls hang low, do they wobble to and fro? Can you tie them in a knot? Can you tie them in a bow? Can you swing then over your shoulder like a regimental soldier? Oh, do your balls hang low? Oh, wow.